Hi friends, it's Jeff Hudson with Relational Gravity and the My Penny Earned Financial Wellness Service. Welcome to the Relational Podcast, where we learn to make a difference to those we serve, including both our customers and our employees. This episode is the third in the series focused on business owners and their advisors. Today I'm joined by my friend Sid Pailla, who's CEO of Sunny Day Fund, which is an organization that helps employers set up workplace emergency saving programs for their employees. Sid will tell us about his journey and just how important emergency savings programs can be to the worker well-being and perhaps even the business bottom line. So Sid, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us. And tell us a little bit about yourself, the life experiences that led you to launch Sunny Day Fund.
Jeff, great to be here. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to see you again here as well. Sunny Day Fund has been quite the journey for me, and it is not something that I intended to take up from a few decades ago when the initial problem that my parents and I faced happened. So the origin story goes back to when my parents and I moved over from Hyderabad, India, to Madison, Wisconsin. And as you may recall from the late 90s, it was a hotter stock market than it was in the last couple of years, for sure. And that's what we were encouraged to do. My parents were combined making $38,000 per year. The employer at the time was really pushing the 401k. Hey, please make sure to put everything that you can into the 401k. And then the dot-com burst happened. My parents were laid off. I was the English-speaking kid in the household, so I'm the one that's helping them navigate all of this in terms of forms and everything else. And that's when we started realizing very quickly, after the taxes, penalties, transaction fees, and of course, the crash, because at the end of the day, that money is invested in the market. It ended up being only 22 cents on the dollar that we could access. We did not have the emergency savings on hand other than cash in a tin can. Of course, that was clearly, as you can hear, a scarring experience. But things like that just kept happening, right? Not just with me, but others as well. But I kept internalizing this as, hey, this is the Sid Pailla or the Pailla family curse, right? We kept thinking about it that way. And honestly, not until I got to business school did I realize that, well, I am not alone. We are not alone.
Right.
In fact, this is the common American story. And the beauty of something like a 401k, 403b, those retirement savings ultimately is that they compound over time, right? You have to let it sit.
Mm-hmm. Taking
them out for when you actually need it right there and then, that's not good advice, nor is it good, because it clearly scars us for a lifetime. So that's where I kept exploring. It's like, hey, if we're able to invest for retirement, why can't we do the same thing for emergencies or all these things that happen between now and retirement? That way, we don't need to steal from our retirement when something does go wrong. So that started as a research project over at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business, and it evolved into a professor challenging me to just go ahead and start it. And I would go on to convince my wife to let me do this. And now we've been going for 5 years. I feel like we helped establish the emergency savings accounts, or ESA market as it is today. It's we're still writing the story. It's still very much even pre-innings, not even inning number one, I would say, in this new category. But it's been such a privilege to meet thousands of employees and hundreds of businesses along the way. It's just been such a gratifying experience to know that something that I lived through and a problem that I wanted to solve could end up helping so many more people live a story that's bigger than my own.
I think that one of the really cool things about that story is that there are people who are in what I call the industry, people who are trying to help people either save for retirement or manage their money well, who came into it from challenges they faced in their own life. I think that gives you a level of empathy and understanding for the people that you're trying to serve when you've lived those challenges yourself. And you can understand, okay, do I just have bad luck? What am I doing wrong? It's that understanding and relationship with money that gets formed very often when we're kids and families are going through hard times that can inspire us to go on and make a difference.
That's really well said. And I think the key word in what you just said is empathy, right? I think genuine empathy is the result of lived experience. And when I think about our team members, the reason they're as delusional about this mission as I am is because of their own lived experiences. They 100%, 110% feel like if I had to go through this, and I know others are going through it, if we can really solve this problem, we will make the world a better place. I also think that it allows for more creative and stronger products as well. I think that when you build not for someone, but both for yourself and alongside the someone that you want to build it, that's when that co-creation, right? That there's a real beauty to it. There's a real genuine community-driven force behind it. And that's actually one of the things that we've noticed at Sunny Day Fund. We had the first version, and then our first employers, our first employees, they kept making suggestions. We kept working with them. We kept iterating with them to the point where when we look at what it is today versus what we had drawn up in the beginning, right? It's not the same thing whatsoever. And that co-creation is incredibly important, and it all starts with empathy.
One of the interesting things is that those of us who are in retirement financial education have been, talking to people for years about, okay, you need to build an emergency fund. And of course, the first question you get is, how much of an emergency fund? Should it be 3 months expenses, 6 months expenses, a year expenses? And I'll tell you that in interacting with folks, a lot of the question is also, well, let's just start with not saying it's going to be 6 months. So let's just start with saving something.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the difference between somebody who says I'm either going to maybe open a separate account in a credit union, or I'm going to just kind of mentally carve out that I've got X number of dollars in my savings account that I can use for an emergency, versus more structured approaches that we're seeing now, such as Sunny Day Fund through the employer? And why would an employer care anyway?
Well, Jeff, I think that you might not realize it directly yet, but somehow you've opened the door for me to talk about mental health, because Calm just had a study that came out that said that the number one source of stress is money. First of all, Calm, for those that don't, it's a meditation app. This is nothing against the app or that organization. And as someone that used to meditate myself, you can't exactly meditate away the problems that you have when it comes to the money or the savings or the debt that you're carrying. You have to have structural changes. So let's take it step by step. Well, you can save mentally for sure, but we're kind of like, there's something called working memory. It's kind of, think of it as your RAM, like what your brain has, that is always has kept it top of mind, and it's kind of remembering just to make sure that you're addressing that thing. This is that nagging feeling that keeps you from going to sleep. This is the thing that also might stress you out more. But the more things that you have in your working memory, the more likely that you are to effectively not be able to focus on the thing that's in front of you, or the more likely you are to make mistakes, not be able to sleep, not be able to take care of your health. It just cascades. I mean, that's the whole reason the entire mental health revolution of sorts happened over the course of the last few years.
Right.
I think that when you look at this, when you look at someone that is being forced to save mentally, say like literally in the same account that they have, or even in their retirement savings account, saying like, well, I'll always be able to do X, Y, and Z things in case that happens. All of a sudden, you're essentially dedicated a portion of your working memory to that. The more and more you dedicate away, like I said, you're going to make mistakes. So when we are setting up separate structures, separate automations, when we say, hey, let's create a payroll deducted emergency savings account where you don't need to worry about having a credit check or having a previous overdraft impacting the ability to open a new account, where you're going to have a really, really high interest rate, 4.6% is what we're doing just now. It's all where the deposits are FDIC insurance eligible and so on. All of a sudden, it just like all the things you need to consider for even opening a new account starts going away. And then you realize that you don't need to go in and connect a separate account and routing number to your payroll and make all those things happen. Well, now it's even easier. And then you realize that your employer is actually going to incentivize your behavior saving, well, now it becomes a no-brainer, quite literally, right? So all the stuff that you had stocked away in your brain as like, these are all the things I need to do, all of a sudden that's just now happening in the background. Think about the amount of brain power that we just freed up. Now, think about that in a different way from the employer perspective, right? If you're an employer, well, don't you want high performers? It's as simple as that, right? Like I'm sure, Jeff, we were talking about the conference in New York last year, right?
Right.
At the DECIA conference, we were talking about a trucking company that was tracking how people who had emergency savings were performing in terms of their driving. And it turned out the people that built up those emergency savings were far less likely to receive tickets. That's just one example. We've seen different instances of that in manufacturing with fewer safety incidents, better attendance rate among our savers when it comes to senior living and quick service restaurant shift workers, and other such use cases across the board. So I think ultimately what we're taking is a really good thought. We know that because of what everyone has said, we know that we need to save up for emergencies. And we may even think that we're doing that in the back of our mind, but we're taking that out of your mind and we're just making it happen automatically so that if something were to happen, the last thing you need to know is remember exactly what you did, because all you need to do is just log in and get your sunny day fund savings out. Like that's it. It's as simple as that. So that's a part of transitioning people's behavior.
So in some ways, it's the same reason that by and large, most folks are not using a savings account someplace to build a retirement fund. If they're employed and they have access to a 401k or other retirement savings tool, that is accessible through the employer and very often has some default levels and some contributions that go on. You don't have to create your own retirement fund. And you're saying that at the same token, you don't have to create your own emergency fund in the sense of carving it out of your bank account or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And better yet, in the world of retirement, yes, there's structural benefits to having a workplace retirement savings account. And we hope to get there with emergency savings ourselves. And I know that we'll be talking about pluses here shortly too. But
Right.
I think that one of the things to remember is that a lot of budgeting happens at the point of the paycheck. If you're waiting for that paycheck to hit your bank account, or worse yet, something else where you're cashing out that money at a payday facility or the like, then it's already too late. And I think that the beauty of retirement savings, health savings, a lot of the voluntary insurance products that we think of is that we are having people understand. It's like we believe that these things that are essential. Like you don't need to think about them. You just need to do them. And so by making it that easy, just like what we have done with the 401k and comparable products, you are really relieving a lot of stress for those individuals.
And if you are in a stressful life anyway, and who doesn't have a little stress in their life, right? It's but there is also that lived stress that some people can relate to. That if your family's lost a breadwinner or something like that, then if you're in crisis mode, the fewer fires you have to put out, the better able you are to focus on living life in some more positive ways too, like showing up to work on time and doing good work while you're there.
Exactly. I mean, just think about business as usual for any given person's working day, assuming that they have a single income stream, that salary, like this is already, we're talking about a fairly decent individual, like a middle class individual right there then.
Right.
And even there, like you are probably taking care of a family member where it's either your parents or your kids or both. There's probably other personal things or health related things in your life that you're managing. You may be doing something for the community. People will fill up their time one way or another. And I
Right.
think that with the type of things that we're talking about, whether it's saving for retirement or saving for emergencies, again, these are must do's, but on the grand scheme of people's days and hours, even carving out a minute can be hard to do so. And I think that thus far we have relied on education, which is in itself is a powerful force. And trust me, I have 4 degrees, so I'll be your ultimate
Right.
champion for education. But I think that we've learned that it's not enough. I think we need to automate the systems, create the broader ecosystem for people to save.
Well, it's not different than other issues that involve mental health. If folks are overwhelmed with a mental health issue, then some medical intervention might help them to approach a longer term solution. And I could certainly see this in the case of building an emergency fund, is that relieving some of that pressure might then open the door for someone to respond better to education.
Yeah, I definitely agree. In fact, we've seen that financial confidence built up. So I'm going to just share two quick stories. Like we have an amazing client. Shout out to Carla or Farmington Country Club. They're a mid-sized employer, have their employees top of mind for sure. And there's the honor of talking to one of the employees over there that's using Sunny Day Fund, one of our savers, as we call them. And she was talking about how she built up the financial confidence as a result of Sunny Day Fund, that she's now started participating in retirement savings as well. Because she started seeing, it's like, oh, this is how much free money that I'll get if I were to just save, whether it's from the employer or the high interest that we're offering. How much, where else can I get that? Like, where else can I get that? Well, are you leaving a 401k match on the table? Are you leaving your compounded growth in a 401k on the table? Are you leaving the tax benefit of a 401k on the table, right? It opens the doors for these conversations. I'm going to change tracks from that to a different piece, especially because you mentioned health on the healthcare side. There's a study, I don't have the citation off the top of my mind. So as a former academic, I feel silly citing this, but
bring it on anyway.
So there was something that said that 40% of folks were avoiding healthcare visits as a result of their money-related situation, even though they have insurance. So they have insurance and they're not going to go see a doctor for, maybe it's a sprained shoulder. Going and seeing someone right away, yes, time is always of the concern, but ultimately you don't know what that will end up becoming, right? Like there's almost a ignorance is bliss situation, because healthcare costs are just so freaking high.
Right.
Now, one of the things that this ends up manifesting in is something called cost-related non-adherence. So cost-related non-adherence is something that insurance companies specifically watch out for, because ultimately, if the doctor is telling you to do something and you don't do it because you think it's going to be super costly, whether it's a prescription or whatever it may be, well, you've just increased the probability of a much higher consequence event down the line. And we know that what drives up health insurance premiums and health costs in general isn't the small thing up front. It's how it compounds into this big thing down the line, where $100 visit could have helped avoid $100,000 surgery down the line, right?
Right.
So
right.
I think that, like, we're just now starting to understand the interrelatedness of what we're talking about, and I think that that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing because, again, it comes back to realizing we need to have a community-driven approach.
Right. So there's been a lot of conversation, like I said, over the years on saving for emergencies. But we've got the Secure 2.0 Act that created pension-linked emergency savings accounts. For the benefit of those listening, we're going to call them PLESs from now on. There's a Sunny Day Fund, and I guess two questions. Number one is, can you tell us a little bit about the differences? But number two, maybe speculate a little bit of why people are caring more now, whether it's the government in the Secure Act or employers caring more about emergency savings for their employees than they might have 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So pluses, just to start with, are emergency savings accounts that are effectively embedded into an existing retirement plan, right? So think your 401k, 403b, 450, whatever it may be, right? I'm just going to use 401k interchangeably with most retirement plans. The biggest benefit of pluses, to give credit where credit is due, and I think that we were a big fan of the fact that this even came out, because ultimately I think it's Congress and policymakers saying, we recognize that the lack of emergency savings is a problem, and we as a nation, as a government, need to do something about it to allow employers to be able to meet their employees where they are, which is emergency expenses. So right there and then, I think it's such a beautiful acknowledgement, and it also enables you to auto enroll people into saving up for emergencies. And I think that's a really compelling reason in itself. Like the auto enrollment piece is fantastic. Now, there's a lot of other nuances about the pluses and that I'm just going to go through. First of all, it's something that has a limit in terms of either how much a person is able to contribute or how much can be maintained in balance. EPSA has left this to the determination of the plan sponsor. So effectively, the employers get to choose how they want it to happen. Anytime that the employers get to choose, or there's this level of, like right there and then already, that type of a customizability, all of a sudden the people that we're relying on are existing record keepers that are providing 401ks with those rails to essentially code in those levels of customizability as well. So right there and then we have immediate friction with almost all of the top 10 record keepers that are out there that are doing 401ks, 403bs, right? And so ultimately, even though this is something that can be done, what we've seen is in the market, the offering still effectively does not exist as a result, or does exist with very, very, very strict limitations in terms of exactly what that product is.
Right.
That is driven by the record keeper. So right off the bat, yes, auto enrollment is great. The balances and the customizability of the balances and the contributions, not so great. And there's other nuances as well. So for example, if you're someone that is a highly compensated individual, if you are someone that is thinking about basically there's qualification restrictions on pluses. There's anything that the employer contributes are not going to go to the pluses. But these are also some of the good things too, right? Like if an employee is contributing, let's say 2% of their salary towards their plusa, they could also receive 2% of that match directly to their 401k, but it won't go towards their emergency savings.
Got it.
It turns out that all of these types of nuances and restrictions, and like I'm more structurally speaking, by the way, these are principal protected accounts. You're not going to it's treated as a Roth. So any growth savings, any tax savings that you're talking about there, at the end of the day, because it's principal protected and because of the overall structure, you're talking about roughly tax benefit of 25 to 50 bucks to the employee, which in the grand scheme of things does not mean as much, especially when you have to take into account transaction fees and other types of things as well. These are the reasons that I don't see employees taking it up as quickly as we would like for them to take up,
Right.
record keepers to take it up as quickly as they'd like to take up, nor the employers. So I think it's a really good idea, but it comes with a lot of footnotes.
Right.
And footnotes are hard to execute when it comes to systems.
Well, you used the word friction, and that barrier to getting the job done and getting it done quickly and efficiently is certainly an important thing to note.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about working memory earlier from an individual perspective and their ability to save. Let's think about working memory from an employer stakeholder's perspective in terms of rolling out a program that they are not familiar with whatsoever.
Right.
Right? It's hard to do. It is definitely a friction and the wrong kind of friction. It's not the kind that says, hey, are you sure you want to take out a 401k loan? You're leaving money on the table if you do that, and it might cost you a $150 transaction fee. That is good friction. Like we're educating the individual about the consequences of what they're about to do. Whereas in this case, we're effectively preventing desired actions with this friction. So I think you're absolutely right.
So in that sense, then, because it is not associated with the retirement savings plan, it's not a PLESA, the programs like the Sunny Day Fund, emergency savings plans through an employer don't have the hoops to jump through, would you say, to get that done for an employer?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I want to clarify that just because there's not hoops to jump through doesn't mean that like a Sunny Day Fund or organizations like ours are not following rules, right?
Right.
We're held to the same standards that any institution that is focused on equipping employees to save up, for banking. So like the FDIC related regulations, CFPB related regulations, making sure that we're conducting the KYC or the Know Your Customer losses associated with the Patriot Act. We're doing all of that type of stuff. It's just that we're bundling all of that in a way so that there's no pressure on the employer to figure out how to go and execute those things, nor the employee. And you don't need to worry about all sorts of like balance limits, contribution limits, additional reporting requirements. I would have said, if you'd asked me like a day ago, like literally a day ago, that there was no fiduciary liability either. But I think that the latest one also comes out to say that ultimately, even if you're electing banking products, it is the duty to pick a banking product that is yielding the right return. So I feel like we're in a really good position there as someone that's offering top-notch interest rates to our savers. But ultimately, like what we're doing is something that's much more customizable to whatever the employer wants to roll out. So for example, for something like a PLUSA, the rules are very set in terms of what you can do. For something like a sunny day fund, which is an out-of-plan emergency savings account, you can roll out the program and reward your hourly employees and your salaried employees in a different way, potentially, if that's what you desire to do. You can even set up different things where people that have been with your organization for a longer amount of time will end up earning those milestone rewards from you along the way. So things like that end up being really crucial ways for employers to not just offer savings benefit for the sake of saving, but savings benefit to also attract and retain workers, because they do have multiple objectives that they're trying to meet. And finally, think about it from an individual perspective, right? In our case, with an out-of-plan savings vehicle, what you typically see is that these are portable accounts that can be accessed even after breakage with employment. You don't need to worry about filling out any forms to roll over or get those funds. And the withdrawal process is a lot simpler. You get the funds the same day or the next day, whereas at least what we have heard through other employees that have saved in PLUSA-like instruments, right, that it's taken them 5 business days at a minimum. So I think, just to be clear, I think that there's strengths on both sides. It's just that what we have seen play out in the market is that there's a stronger preference for out-of-plan vehicles because it's just easier to get off the ground and more impactful in terms of employees saving right off the bat.
Got it. So it's and I think a point well made also that this will also fit the needs, helping an employer manage risk where they need to manage risk and still offer something. So
exactly. That reminded me of an employer that we were talking with the other day, and one of the things that they were concerned about with the pension-linked emergency savings account, and just to be clear, I don't feel like this is a risk, but this is the perception that existed in the market, right? So trying to elevate that is that, hey, well, why are my highly compensated individuals not able to save for emergencies? Because, well, I know just looking at their student loans, other things going on, that someone that's making $180,000 per year needs to save for emergencies just the same level as someone that's making $40,000 per year, right? And that's one of the reasons we think about it in terms of months of emergency savings on hand, right, rather than the amount itself. Though I will say that we like to start out with the amount itself because people work better with hard numbers.
Right.
I think that's a good thing to point out, because with programs with wider eligibility, you don't feel like anyone is missing out on it. So I think that there's a fairness related risk here as well.
And that gets at I think 2 questions. Number one is just the question of, when I first think about emergency savings programs and we talk about the empathy of the individual who's hospitality worker who is driving to work and the tire on their car dies. It goes flat. They have to replace it. How am I going to pay for that? And that can be a major crisis to get me to work and maybe a couple other people with me. And so we think about those people who are lower income individuals, and we say, okay, we can understand why this may help them. But you also mentioned the salaried person making $180,000 a year. Are emergency savings programs primarily for those who make less? Or is it equally beneficial to everybody? And what do you see in terms of uptake?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to start out with this piece, which is to say that it. So we just had on it was it April 15th, tax day, and we were tracking how withdrawals were happening, and we saw roughly 2 times the weekly volume that we typically see right ahead of tax day. And we're still going through to figure out exactly who it is, just to get a sense of income level attribution, whatnot. But actually, what we're seeing this, my early gut is saying that it is like more so middle income workers,
Yep.
not necessarily someone that is making $15 per hour. So I think that right there already kind of shows that it's interesting to see that people are relying on their sunny day fund, because instead of a tax refund, people are having to pay taxes, and that's a surprise. And so they're doing that.
That can be an
Now,
emergency. It's not a flat
it
tire, but it
is.
can be an emergency.
Yeah, it is. I honestly, I use the flat tire metaphor all the time, but what we've typically seen as larger emergencies are housing related emergencies pop up quite often, whether it's an internal appliance or something more broadly, like literally access to housing. It's a device that you absolutely need in order to, or separately, a device that you absolutely need to even work. So that may be like something like a mobile phone, or maybe something that happened to a computer, if that's what happened. We've seen like pet related emergencies. And I know that we have insurance across all sorts of different things, but it's hard to insure against life. So does that mean that is it just lower income workers that are winning out? My simple answer is no, it's not. So it is the case that we have higher income workers that are earning north of $200,000 using Sunny Day Fund. Now, that's not the majority of the population, nor even close to it. But we know that they're in our system, and we know that they're saving, and they're saving a lot more as well. And so we definitely get that. And we've had those user discussions with them as well, because going in, that was not necessarily the person that we're thinking of, right? Because we thought that they would be much more focused on like optimizing their investments and all sorts of graphs and all sorts of things. But honestly, it's funny how well simplicity and like a goal-driven user experience can get, the hearts and minds of someone that just wants to like get some goals done over the course of the next 3 years. So we've had a chance to learn that even higher income earners want something super simple to build up those savings.
Right.
Now, more broadly speaking, the impact is definitely higher in your lower income individuals. And the reason for that is fourfold. So first, we see those individuals who are not currently participating in retirement savings, like I was talking about with that grill master from earlier. We see those individuals starting with Sunny Day Fund, and then as a result of the confidence that they built up in Sunny Day Fund, starting to participate in retirement savings. And of course, there's also the aspect of not taking loans and early withdrawals and so on out of their retirement savings. Number two, lower income workers, while it's not always the case, they do disproportionately end up being younger workers. So those younger workers end up having near-term goals that they would like to achieve. Moving out of their parents' house is an example of a near-term
Right.
goal. I mean, maybe we can personally relate to that a little bit,
Their
right?
goal and their parents' goal.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's a true joy to someone putting down a security deposit on their own apartment, right? Like
Right.
what a car used to be in terms of personal freedom, that's what it is to put down a security deposit nowadays.
My own
Like to
place.
be able to live somewhere that is not with your parents, right? So two, like just near-term goals. Number three, for those lower income workers, there is an aspect to it where we have found that they are disproportionately from a racial ethnographic, Black, Hispanic, and from a gender ethnographic, female. And we have seen the data out there, right? And then I feel like C First does an excellent job of elevating this. The work from Morningstar, Aspen, Dacia, right? Like they've done an excellent job of elevating this. Ebury has done it too. Essentially, we've seen that they're more likely to take out loans and early withdrawals because they're less likely to have emergency savings on hand. And we've ultimately started realizing that's because those individuals' respective 401ks are being leaned on from a household perspective as a source of savings. So the use case itself has ended up being different. And then last but not least, from a lower income individual perspective, those are also jobs that are typically tied to higher turnover. So from an employer perspective, you're trying to engage population as inflation continues to push those wages up in more and more creative ways where you're helping them understand it's like, yes, I'm paying you more, but I also want my money that I'm paying you more to go a longer way. And yes, I can offer you retirement savings, but that continues to not be an immediate priority for individuals. Not that doesn't mean it's not a priority.
Right.
So how do I meet people where they are? And that's why they're leaning on Sunny Day Fund. So as a result of those four things, we're really seeing a larger impact in industries with lower income workers. That includes hospitality, quick service restaurants, manufacturing, senior living industries that do have workers that are in general are making sub six-figure wages. And so, yes, will everyone benefit? 100%. Will lower income workers relatively benefit more? 100%. And as a result, the industries that employ them will benefit even more.
Sid, I want to thank you very much for being a part of this. And it is, as always, it's very important to me to reach out to employers and other folks to say, how can we help the people we care about? And I think when you look at the whole emergency fund conversation, it clearly is a relevant conversation to the people we care about as employees, but also certainly a good potential for a bottom line impact so that you're making both the CFO and the Chief Human Resources Officer happy. Thank you for listening to another Relational Gravity podcast. And remember, it's about relationships always.